today and tomorrow, and that's our big concern. You can see the area we're most concerned about for flash flooding in the dark green in cities like Quebec and Montreal in southern Canada, then back down to Burlington, Vermont, Manchester, New Hampshire, Portland, Maine, Worcester, Massachusetts, back to Scranton, Pennsylvania. That's where flash flooding is most likely, considering how much rain we've already seen in those areas. That said, everybody in green has a risk for flooding and flash flooding between this afternoon and tomorrow evening. Now today, thunderstorms are mostly kept to the Ohio Valley. You can see western Pennsylvania and upstate New York, looking at far western New York here into Buffalo, with a few nasty storms later this afternoon and evening. Most of the Northeast stays relatively calm and quiet, same with the Mid-Atlantic, especially along I-95 and east toward the coastline. Then there's Friday, and the storms start to push toward 95, and you can see Boston, New York, Philly, and I think even DC gets a nasty thunderstorm.
Let's go forward. Go forward, go forward. Go forward. There was an area that I listened to a while ago that really made a lot of sense and what the guy's talking about pertaining to water runoff. Hold it right there.
Things are
Back up just a little bit. Right there.
Morning, I'm Bernie Radio.
And I'm Christina Shalhoub. We've had a lot going on today, and look, it's bad timing for those looking to beat the heat this summer as well. An increasing number of beaches are actually closing because of harmful bacteria in the water.
AccuWeather's Emmy Victor has the story.
as millions of people look to cool off this summer. Warnings are increasing to stay out of the water at hundreds of beaches across the country. High levels of E. coli have reportedly prompted beaches to close for one day or more in at least 20 states this year.
Beaches test for what's called fecal indicator bacteria. This is bacteria that indicates the presence of, well, there's no pleasant way to say it, poop.
While there are many ways bacteria can end up in the water, rainfall is one of the most common.
When we pave over our landscapes with roadways and parking lots and big box stores, etc., when we get heavy rains, there's nowhere for that rain to go. So it pulls all of the oil and grease and bacteria and sweeps it off either into nearby waterways or into our sewage systems, which all too often overflow.
According to a study just released by Environment America, 55% of over 3,000 beaches tested experienced at least one day of high E. coli.
What he's saying is the contaminants, let me back up for a second, I don't want to miss it. The contaminants on all the roads pertaining to your tires, pertaining to all the soot, carbon dioxide, poisoning, etc., that basically falls either on the highways or falls on the concrete structures, that whenever it does rain, rather than that rain going into the ground and the ground basically being a filtering system, now it just basically runs off into rivers and streams and winds up in our oceans. I noticed this the first time that I was down in Florida in the Orlando area in 1979 versus me going back to Florida. I think it was in 89 or 90, something like that. But I noticed a big difference in going out into the ocean, and the ocean, the Gulf, basically feeling very oily, contaminated, sticky, gooey on my body. And I knew then that we was definitely contaminating the water from, in comparison to what it felt like in 79 versus basically 10 years later. So yeah, what this guy's saying is making sense in regards towards all the highways and all the concrete structures, that now we've changed the dynamics of where the water actually used to run off into, that now it runs off in different areas and it winds up either in rivers, streams, or in our oceans.
Say it, poop.
While there are many ways bacteria can end up in the water, rainfall is one of the most common.
When we pave over our landscapes with roadways and parking lots and big box stores, etc., when we get heavy rains, there's nowhere for that rain to go. So it pulls all of the oil and grease and bacteria and sweeps it off either into nearby waterways or into our sewage systems, which all too often overflow.
According to a study just released by Environment America, 55% of over 3,000 beaches tested experienced at least one day of high E. coli levels last year.
And on a smaller number of beaches, 363 of those beaches were potentially unsafe for swimming on 1/4 of the days that were tested.
Swimming in the water on these days can be dangerous and make you sick. The EPA says when visiting beaches, look for any signs indicating that the beach is closed or the water isn't safe. Adults and children should also avoid swallowing water or swimming with an open wound. For AccuWeather, I'm Emmy Victor.
Oof, not so refreshing. All right, thanks, Emmy. Good tips there. We'll take a live look from Goodyear, Arizona, just west of Phoenix. And you know, Phoenix, you have been a big conversation over the past 3 weeks. Let's talk about what's happening in the West, where it's basically like living on the surface of the sun. Isn't that neat? All right, let's take a look. We have heat alerts for millions of people, including in the desert Southwest. In fact, more than 100.
They hadn't seen nothing yet. They hadn't seen nothing yet whenever it comes to these extreme heat levels that the planet's fixing to start experiencing. And as far as the contaminants, I mean, it just makes sense that most of your high-rise or even your big commercialized buildings has tar. Well, what's tar got in it? It's got oil, petroleum oil in it. Where does it run off to? There you go.
100 million people are under heat alerts today between our heat advisories, excessive heat watches, and excessive heat warnings. You can see them stretching all the way from the Sunshine State back to the West Coast there. The bright red representing our excessive heat warnings, and a large number of those are across the Southwest, from Fresno to Las Vegas, back to cities like Phoenix again. Now, I keep mentioning Phoenix. Why am I so intent on talking about Phoenix? Because Phoenix, you are in the way of a record right now. 20 straight days of 110 degrees or higher. I didn't say it was a good record, I just said it was a record. And I think we're gonna get to day number 21 today, no problem. By the way, 21 days, that's the historical average of 110 plus degree days we see in the entire year in Phoenix. The most we've ever seen was 53 days. That was back in 2020. So we're on our way there. 23 days so far. I think today's number 24 on that list, if that's how you're counting anyway. Let's take a look at high temperatures today in Phoenix. 117 degrees here. Again, I think we're going to hit that record, no problem, or continue it, I should say. Palm Springs, 118, 118 in Needles, California, 92 degrees in Flagstaff. And when you're looking at Flagstaff, that's pretty impressive, higher elevation there. So something we're going to pay attention to. I think we're just going to keep racking up the days in the desert Southwest here. High pressure, large and in charge continue.
We're going to continue to see the dynamics changing from year to year, breaking records, changing, getting worse. It's awful. So if we're starting to feel the effects now the way that we are, could you only imagine what the animal life, mammal life, fish, whales, all that other stuff, can you only imagine what they're experiencing? They're not stupid. They know what's going on.
South across, there comes across the western part of Hudson Bay, and then eventually it'll start sending some energy into the upper Midwest this weekend. With that, we're going to start seeing some isolated thunderstorms, especially Saturday and the Sunday. I think most areas are rain-free, but keep an eye to the sky, and also ahead of that, temperatures start rising a little bit, but certainly we're not looking at any heat. All right, here's a live look from Pittsburgh. AccuWeather early continues after a quick break. Stay with us.
So yesterday. and a tornado that moved through Rocky Mount, North Carolina and eastern North Carolina. So we are continuing to track severe weather again for today, and notice that flash flooding will be a concern again, in addition to isolated tornadoes. So we could see similar situations to what we saw yesterday when we look at the areas that we are mainly focusing on, especially into the orange color. So we are talking Indianapolis up through Detroit over to Cleveland, where we are talking about that moderate risk for severe weather, which means numerous severe thunderstorms will be possible, especially throughout Indiana into Ohio, into northern parts of Kentucky, and into northwestern portions of Pennsylvania. But that extends farther into the Carolinas again, down through Charlotte up to Buffalo and over to St. Louis for parts of the area seeing the severe thunderstorms. Also concerned about the localized damaging wind gusts, 60 to 70 miles per hour, with the accurate local storm maximum to 80 miles per hour. So all combined here, this will cause some travel disruptions as we head throughout our Thursday and Thursday night. We've already seen a decent complex here of strong thunderstorms rolling on through Missouri, starting to see more of those popping up into central and southern parts of Illinois. And then we've also seen more in the way of heavy rain and thunderstorms moving into eastern parts of Tennessee. And I do expect more activity here moving through in kind of those similar locations that are already dealing with the heavy thunderstorms at this moment. So we're going to continue to track these, but I also want you to focus into that area that I showed you for the severe thunderstorms through the northern part.
Hit 100 degrees or higher, and guess what? The old record was 23 days. We have blown that number out of the water, and I think we're adding day number 35 today.
Good God. So miserably sad.
Irrigate.
Isolated flash flooding and an isolated tornado or two are also part of the equation. Stay safe.
Christina, thank you so much. Coming up, we're going to have more on an update of what's going on in the tropics. Stay with us. That forecast is just a few minutes away.
So you're living with your core body temperature being so hot that it's unhealthy. You can try to keep drinking water. Water gets warm outside very quickly, so it's not cool water.
When the sun goes down now, I'll walk up the street to the store. About 6 blocks up. There's no way I can walk to the store right now. I won't make it. It's too hot. It's not enough. I don't have enough water or whatever I need inside of me because I've been homeless, being neglected through my nutrients. To walk to the store means death. And who wants that shouldn't be an issue here in America. Decide whether you should walk to the store or stay in the shade because you're gonna die.
We hand out tons of water, bottle after bottle of water, trying to keep people hydrated. We will see, though, if this continues, we will see more heat-related deaths because it is a life and death situation.
And unfortunately, more heat to come in Phoenix. Look at the count here now, 20 days in a row at or above 110 degrees. The old record was 18 days back in 1974. And when we look, we're going to continue to see that count. 117, your exclusive AccuWeather forecast for today. Even hotter as we head throughout the day on Friday. Saturday, still hot and above that historical average of 107. Also, pretty hot throughout the southeast. Look at Jacksonville at 98 for today. Atlanta also seeing temperatures above the historical average, and a hot day in Charleston, South Carolina. And then you factor in the humidity, the sun angle for this time of year. We look to the AccuWeather real field temperature, and things could feel as hot as 110 to 115 throughout parts of the southeast today. Mainly dry. Most of the storms are going to stay a bit farther through the mid-south and very southern portions of Florida. And as we head into the day tomorrow, kind of similar here where we will see the storms throughout Tennessee and South Florida. Otherwise, things do stay hot along the Gulf Coast from New Orleans over to Jacksonville and up through Raleigh. A hot end to the week. Stay safe.
One way to avoid expensive car repair bills is to be a race car driver.
Awful.
Ethics code on the Supreme Court for the first time in U.S. history. It's
They was having a court date a while ago, and I forgot where it was. Oh, it was a heated conversation, that was
Any
for sure.
of the good economic news.
They did.
Bias and sadly including violent incidents.
Now, it was said earlier in this hearing that Mr. Kennedy is a smart man. Now, so far as I know, he does not have any specific education or training in medicine. He is not an epidemiologist, one who studies infectious diseases. He has never conducted clinical trials in a professional setting. He has never done scientific research in a professional laboratory and published scientific findings in a peer-reviewed publication. Ms. Wiley, what kind of harm does someone with absolutely no medical training or knowledge do when they espouse unfounded anti-Asian vaccine theories during a fraught time like COVID?
One of the things that happened in this historic pandemic was that there was certainly a need to get on top of very quickly what the science said. I am not a scientist either. And so what social media platforms did was go and speak to government agencies because their own policies, their own user agreements required them to look and figure out what the facts were so that they could assess what was responsible and what was not responsible to post. I say that because it was incredibly important to ensure that people were getting real-time information as possible, but also ones that really demonstrated what all of us need, rather than where and how we should ascribe blame, or where and how we should consider who benefits and who doesn't, because we were all harmed. But I say this in part because it was the social media platforms themselves that reached out to government agencies, including Health and Human Services and CDC, to get that information. And under the vacated opinion, it's really important to understand, it has been vacated by the Fifth Circuit, this preliminary injunction on all these incidents we're talking about, because one of the things it would do, in my view, just as in my legal view, is that it was actually saying that the government could not respond to such requests under this injunction, which is incredibly overbroad, dangerous, and doesn't allow government agencies to do what they are chartered to do.
Now, I'm an attorney by training, and one of the things I learned very early on in constitutional law is that no right given to the people of the United States is absolute, and that includes the right to free speech, because you do not have the right to shout fire in a crowded theater because it could produce harm and death of people by being false. These social media platforms have user policies to try to prevent that kind of harm. Is that not correct, Ms. Wiley?
So that is correct.
Democrats there, like Representative Sanchez, are trying to lay out a case to discredit the witness of RFK Jr. And of course, they're doing that with Maya Wiley, civil rights attorney there, also ran for office here in New York City and worked for one of the liberal media outlets as well as a contributor. What's interesting there, though, and I'm sure she is a great attorney, Sanchez, but you do have the right to yell fire in a theater unless there's no fire. It's pretty simple the way the law works. We're going to move on. We'll dip back in when they go back to RFK Jr. and he gets to defend himself yet again in this attack by Democrats. We'll dip in, and of course this is all about the weaponization of government and stepping on free speech. And so when those topics come back up, we'll dip back in. For now, let's go to this.
That's Bidenomics in action. Bidenomics, right? It kind of flows off the tongue.
Bidenomics is about the investments that this country is making.
That's Bidenomics.
The architect of Bidenomics is Biden.
Bidenomics, which is the word of the day, word of the week, word of the month, word of the year.
The White House is calling it a big Bidenomic success. They suddenly love that word. President Biden will be in Philadelphia in about an hour to continue pushing his economic agenda. Not so good news, though, when it comes to voters and how they feel right now. A new poll shows more than 30% saying the economy is the most important election issues to them. Nearly 60% of voters disapprove of Biden's handling of the economy. Important, don't like what he's doing. The White House downplaying those numbers, though.
The polls don't tell the whole story. They don't tell the full story, and we understand that. The data shows the combination of unemployment and inflation is in near historic lows. And that's what we have seen. Consumer confidence is increasing, and also wages are rising. That's what certainly the data is showing.
Power panel now. Jason Riley, Fox News contributor and Wall Street journalist, columnist. Tamika Isaac Devine, former Obama campaign advisor and surrogate. Jason, I'll come to you first.
How about this one? One McDonald's branch charging $18 for a Big Mac meal. That is not going over well. Ashley, even to me, that seems an extremely expensive meal for McDonald's. Where is this happening?
At a rest stop just off Interstate 95 in Darien, Connecticut. That is one of the, by the way, country's wealthiest towns in upscale Fairfield County. The eye-watering prices were recorded by a motorist who took a photo of the menu. The restaurant also charges $19 for a quarter pounder with cheese and bacon meal, or a quarter pounder deluxe, both of which include medium fries and a medium soft drink. What a deal. A cheeseburger usually found on the dollar menu going for $17 for two. Get this, on Grubhub, the items are even more expensive. A Big Mac meal will cost you $21.59, while a double quarter pounder with cheese meal costs $22.79. There's been no comment, by the way, from either the franchisee that owns the restaurant or McDonald's corporate office, but that is expensive.
But I'd just like to know the sales, too. I mean, can you sell an $18 Happy
Yeah,
Meal?
right.
Good question.
Good God.
In the shooting in downtown Auckland today, we are saddened by the inexcusable loss of life to gun violence, and our thoughts with the people of Auckland, Tamaki Maraka, and Aotearoa, New Zealand. Now, the Games of the World Cup are historic this time around. More tickets have been sold than any Women's World Cup previously, and 32 teams will this time take part, with Team USA the favourites. We'll all hope that the shadow of this terrible incident Thursday morning will not loom too large over the competition. Angus Watson in Sydney, Australia, for CNN.
Well, FIFA says it is confident the tournament can go on as planned, as the world's top footballers play before record crowds in Australia and New Zealand. Both of those hosts.
Man.
Anderson today for a free appointment. 1-800-460-7700. That's 1-800.
Exciting times. New Zealand making a mark in their first match. What a fantastic.
That actors are worried AI will steal their jobs. Next, I'm talking to the CEO of a leading Hollywood AI firm. Could AI replace actors completely? Good question. We'll get an answer too. We'll be there.
The right. We're seeing that shift. He says Biden needs these voters to get back in the White House. So what does he do? And I'll go in reverse order and start with you, Tamika.
Clearly, the no labels is the only thing they can do is spoil an election. And so if they're really,
for whom?
their
Mainly your
goal
party?
is unity. I'm sorry?
For whom? Mainly your party?
I think for the election, for the voters. I mean, I think when you talk about a no labels candidate and a unity ticket, and you really want to talk about unity, you have to talk about the issues that are causing disunity within this country. Going after having a third-party candidate running for president is not actually unifying this country, is actually adding to the division. So I think No Labels needs to focus on what they really say they're about, and that's unity and talking about issues that are important to bringing this country together. I think the party is going to be fine regardless, but I do think that having No Labels is really kind of shifting the issue away from where the president and the administration can actually do things and actually taking us away from the issues that we need to be talking about.
Well, it is rare, Jason, that a third party would have that kind of cash on hand and could get itself on a ballot in all 50 states.
Sure, it is rare, but third-party candidates aren't rare. What's more rare about this third-party part is that they don't really stand for an issue or a cause so much as what they freely admit. They say they're an insurance policy, and they're really trying to dictate what the two major parties do in terms of who they nominate, and that's what's really odd about this. And the Democrats are right to be concerned. The polling shows that in a three-way race, Joe Biden would lose to Donald Trump, whereas in a two-way race, Biden has a much better chance against Donald Trump. So that's why they're concerned. But don't be fooled here. It's not that the left is opposed to a third-party candidacy per se.
Care today and ask for your free decision guide. Learn more about plan options and rates to fit your needs. Now, if you like this, greater freedom, you'll love that Medicare supplement plans have no networks and no referrals needed. See any doctor, any specialist, anywhere in the U.S.
She calls it indoctrination. Plus, more on the government censorship of information in COVID-19 and where the virus actually came from.
It's very explosive findings that shows that the government, these government-funded scientists waged a disinformation campaign, a propaganda campaign aimed at misleading the American people, and it worked.
We have been watching Democratic candidate, it's Biden's biggest rival right now in his party, RFK Jr., all morning long. He's making big waves on Capitol Hill. More on his stand against the government picking and choosing what information they think is right for the American public to get to see. Dr. Mark Siegel to weigh in.
Fox News Primetime. The right voices at the right time. Laura Ingraham.
Real Americans need to be heard.
Jesse Waters.
We cover the stories nobody else will.
Sean Hannity.
I believe in faith, family, and the USA.
Greg Gutfeld.
This close to actual entertainment.
Fox News Primetime. Premiering tonight on Fox News. America is watching.
You're welcome, America.
July 20th, 1969, Apollo 11 astronauts, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, they became the first humans ever to land on the moon. 6 hours after landing, Armstrong took his first step on the moon and famously said, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." July 20th, 1969. And now you know. Don't forget to watch American Built, Mondays, 9 p.m. Eastern, only here on Fox Business Prime. Back to the markets, please. I see a nice rally for the Dow Industrials and a nasty sell-off for the NASDAQ. The movers include Netflix, really going places today.
You know, Wall Street seems to be focusing on that lackluster revenue number. That's despite Netflix adding almost triple the number of subscribers as expected in the quarter. I think the thinking is the early signs that this ad tier, you know, the $7 cheaper program and the password sharing crackdown, they might not be the cash cow despite this promising start.
That's quite a sell-off.
I know.
Nearly 10%.
Seems a little bit overdone, or at least how it feels.
C3AI and Upstart AI.
Yeah, so these are AI stocks. They're both down about 3%. They're up 200 and 300+% this year, respectively. Is Wall Street rethinking them or rethinking AI and all the hype around it? Upstart helps lenders use AI to make their lending decisions. Lenders are pulling back, right?
This is the first time for a long time that I've seen AI on the prompter and the stock's gone down. You don't see that very often. You really don't. Frontier Airlines.
They're celebrating their 29th anniversary with $29 fares. The catch, travel before November 15th and book today. Must book by midnight.
That's down 2%. Okay.
That was fun.
Right, the Women's World Cup kicked off this morning. It's being held in Australia and New Zealand, down under. Right, Ashley, for a start, just tell me when does the US play?
Well, the US start their campaign Friday against Vietnam, Saturday local time, and they're looking for an unprecedented third consecutive world title. Both co-hosts of the tournament, New Zealand and Australia, won their opening games today, 1-0. I saw the Australian game, bit of a battle. But now that the competition's underway, the governing body of world soccer, FIFA, says there's no guarantee players will receive the payments they were promised. Let me explain. FIFA had previously confirmed that the 732 players taking part in this World Cup will be paid at least $30,000 each. The paycheck rises if teams do well, with each player for the winning team of the tournament earning $270,000. But FIFA says there are too many complications in the payments, handing them out, including residency and taxation issues. They say that would be best handled by the individual countries. So a little bit of a mess there. And from prize money, by the way, to burritos and beans, Chipotle offering free meals when the U.S. women's team scores a goal during the team's first 3 games. When the team scores a go-ahead goal, tying goal, or a lead extending goal, a unique code will be posted on the women's Twitter account. The first 2,500 fans to text the code get a free meal. So there you go. I know you're going to be all over it, Stu.
Yes. Not Chipotle, but the World Cup. Yeah, that's the way I go. Right,
Yes.
Ash, thank you very much indeed. Let's get to the Hollywood strike. This is a big deal here. One of the big concerns among the writers and actors is, of course, artificial intelligence. We have with us a big hitter in this area. Brady Brim-DeForest is the chief executive at Formula Monks. That is a Hollywood studio AI firm, and a very important firm at that. He joins me now. Brady, welcome to New York. Good to see you on the set.
Thanks so much for having me, Stuart. Glad to be here.
Could AI just flat out replace actors?
No, I think what's really important to understand is that AI is not going to eliminate jobs. Fundamentally, it's like electricity. It's going to empower human innovation, not replace it.
And I can see the time when you've got somebody on television, for example, is an AI character, it's not a real person, and the words are being put into his or her mouth. I can see that happening.
Yeah, I think the delta between that, which is a bit science fiction-y, and reality is pretty broad. I think humans crave authentic experiences, and an important part of AI is going to be enabling humans to do more, be more capable at their jobs, and reach out to audiences in new ways. So I think that AI is going to create a proliferation of new content.
You're heavily involved in this. This is what you do.
Indeed.
If I ask for a script from a chat box, for example, is that script up to the quality that I would expect? And that the creative juices have gone into it?
I don't think so. I don't think you can replace human judgment that easily. I think that a chatbot can help a writer.
They're gonna try. No, they're gonna try.
Certainly. And I think that you know, what will happen ultimately is AI is going to make a writer's job easier. They're going to be able to look at a multitude of options, but you can't remove that layer of human judgment from the equation entirely. Machines mimic, and AI in particular, mimics human behavior. It doesn't actually, it is not sentient. And I think we're a long ways off from...
It's not sentient?
It's not.
You're absolutely sure of that?
I'm absolutely sure of it.
Let me just question you. Tom Friedman, brilliant guy on the New York Times. A couple of months ago, he did an AI test.
Mm-hmm.
He had a sonnet. I think he had a statement put into the form of a Shakespearean sonnet, and then it was translated into Arabic, and that is a creative process. The AI, the chatbot, did it all, but it was creative. You've got to be creative to go from English to Arabic in a sonnet form.
Yeah, but I think critically, you have to remember that AI is just mimicking human behavior again. So if you don't have source material, AI isn't going to be able to perform. If you want to create a new genre of music, for instance, you need human input. You could use AI to synthesize a song that sounds like Marvin Gaye, but you can't necessarily create net new source material from scratch with AI today. In the future, perhaps, but I think, again, we're a long ways off from that. And humans make use of technology. We take technology and use it to make our lives easier and simpler, to remove the mundane, to automate the work that we do every day, just like the transition from typewritten memos to email.
Okay. Any sign at all that the strike might be winding down or coming to an end?
I think we've got a ways to go yet. I think people are very anxious. There's a lot of anxiety out there. The only way to really, temper that is to have an open, transparent dialogue. I see AI as a democratizer. I think it's going to empower individual content creators, just like streaming video did, to create tons of new content that's going to be hyper-personalized and targeted.
How are you using AI in your company? Because you've got, I think, you're a global consultancy. You've got 9,000 employees, I believe.
Yes, we do across 30 countries. So AI for us is about automating the repetitive tasks that humans actually don't want to do. I'll give you an example. If you're running an advertising campaign from BMW like we do, and you need to create 400,000 distinct assets, versions of BMW's product line in different locations, configurations of cars, different paint jobs, etc. That is a tremendous amount of very laborious work that isn't particularly creative. It's very programmatic. AI is doing a wonderful job at taking cars that humans design in ad campaigns that humans write and design and enabling us to go much broader, much faster, and remove tasks that, frankly, it's hard to find anyone to actually do.
That's terrific. Brady Brim DeForest knows what he's talking about with AI and graciously came onto our program to explain. We really appreciate that, Brady.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. I think the producers put this here to get me to work forever. Here's the story. A new study shows white men see the biggest cognitive declines after retiring. It's almost 3 times more acute than their black peers. We will try to explain that one to you. I'm grateful for putting it in the show. A big-time donor rescinds his $400,000 gift to Arizona State University. He pulled the cash after the school fired a staffer who invited a conservative speaker to campus. The horror. The donor blames, quote, left-wing hostility. Bill Malugin, Star reporter, has the report after this.
The pressure. You've got a currency that is taking a knock, and then you have the dilemma of trying to find ways to raise money, and you're putting the burden on the most vulnerable. So what are the realities then now for average Kenyans?
Eleni, even those who don't support these protests agree that their life has gotten harder. In the 10 months since President William Ruto became president, they have seen the cost of commodities increase exponentially. You mentioned at the top that, for instance, fuel prices are up because despite a temporary court order to block these increases in the taxes, that did go ahead. And what happens when you have an increase in fuel prices? That leads to an immediate increase in most other basic commodities. So that's what's happening. But people who are struggling when inflation is at almost 10%, people who are seeing their lives getting difficult, cannot quite wrap around a president who promised that he would be for the hustlers. He's made a whole big thing about being from nothing to this presidency, and he promised when he was campaigning that if he was elected, he would make this country a country for everyone.
Larry Madowo, thank you so very much. Great to have you on the show. Well, fuel prices are also up in Nigeria. Ever since the country's new president ended a subsidy that had kept gas prices low for decades, transportation and electricity costs are now on the rise, forcing Nigerians to make drastic changes to survive. CNN's Stephanie Busari is in Lagos.
The first subsidy is gone.
It was a moment that caught many off guard. Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu accelerating ahead, announcing his first major policy at his inauguration in May, triggering panic buying at petrol stations, with fuel prices tripling immediately and soaring to record highs. The shifting gears angered Nigerians, who in the past have protested previous attempts to remove the fuel price caps. Nearly 2 months on, and people are feeling the pinch.
At the end of the month, I'll have to borrow money and feed, since 80% of my salary goes into transportation.
The rise in petrol prices poured fuel on the economic fire, with inflation now hitting nearly 23%.
The first impact is on inflation, the second impact is on income, and the third impact is when will relief come.
That relief, however, is not in sight yet, with Tinubu pleading for patience. It's rush hour on this busy street in the heart of Lagos Island. And typically, the street would be gridlocked with cars stuck in Lagos's legendary go-slow traffic. It seems an unintended consequence of the fuel subsidy removal is that people simply aren't getting into their cars. Increased operating costs, including fuel-powered generators to combat the country's erratic electricity supply, are also forcing some businesses to press the brakes. While others, such as this clothing store in Lagos, are finding creative solutions to stay afloat.
Total freaking chaos. Total chaos.
And I got to tell you, I mean, you know, this getting on an airplane these days is almost chaotic. I mean, it's just really, really.
Jose, the last three flights I've been on have been delayed by at least 2 hours. So I don't even want to know what some of the nightmare scenarios are like.
I have some nightmare stories as well. I'm sure everybody at home that's gotten on an airplane or gotten to an airport recently have those same stories. Hey, Doug, real quick, we also got earnings from Tesla.
Yes, we did. And Tesla shares are down right now. So the EV giant, one of the best performing stocks in the market already, the report was good. Profits and revenues both better than expected, but there are still concerns on what the future holds, what profit margins will look like because of increasing competition from other automakers, because it's already cut prices, and that affects profit margins. Also, what's going to happen with the Cybertruck? It just launched. Will it move the needle, Jose, for them in the future? That's a big question for sure.
Yeah, they got like, what, million plus orders for 2 million orders for Cybertruck already in the bank?
And they need to show that they can actually produce at that level and that there will be demand for that Cybertruck out there. That remains to be seen.
Dominic Chu, it's always a pleasure. Thank you, my friend. Sure. Coming up, New York City Mayor Adams is sending a message to migrants at the southern border. Quote, "We have no more room in our city." We'll talk about this shift next. You're watching Jose Diaz-Balart Reports on MSNBC.
How did things get so complex?
Choices that were unimaginable just a few months ago. They're walking long hours in the scorching heat. You've been here, you've seen how hot it is. They're sitting in the dark in their homes simply because, as you say, the national grid gives only a few hours of electricity per day, and so many people were forced to buy generators powered by petrol. Now, they simply can't afford it. So people are sitting in darkness because it's just the only choice that they have. And then you're looking at the poorest of the poor Nigerians. What choices do they have to make in already quite difficult circumstances? And, you know, it's just a lot of tough decisions that Nigerians are having to make. Petrol prices are now at record high. People are walking, they're just not fueling their cars. And you walk into stores, there's signs everywhere saying, "Oh, we regret that we've had to increase our prices." It's just a knock-on effect across the board. Eleni.
Yeah, a really tough decision that the Nigerian government had to make because it was, of course, very expensive to keep this up. Stephanie, sorry, great to have you on this story. Give us a little bit of perspective of what it means in real terms. Well, coming up on Connect the World, a grand jury is meeting at this hour to discuss possible charges related to Donald Trump's actions on January 6th and whether he tried to overturn his 2020 election loss. We'll be right back.
It's chaotic.
Of the voice from the right, and we learned that in spades when we put on this event with Charlie Kirk and Dennis Prager, and it just drove them crazy. They number one, they don't want donors to meddle with the classroom, and they don't want conservative speakers to speak on campus.
And in a statement to Fox News, Arizona State says the university has a history of allowing free speech and that the media reports about the firing of Lewis's staff member have been one-sided and inaccurate, writing in part, quote, "Mr. Lewis decided to discontinue funding that paid for more than $300,000 per year in salary and benefits costs for the executive director of the now-dissolved center. But the speaker series and classes that were created at the center will continue at ASU, and the faculty who delivered that content through the center will continue to do so." In the meantime, Lewis and Arizona State have now removed their association with each other off of both of their respective websites. We'll send it back to you.
Bill Milligan, thank you very much indeed. See you again later. White men experience the biggest cognitive decline after retirement. Ashley, is this a trick to get me to work till I'm 100?
At least.
My patrol about 100 feet back, and I stepped on a pressure plate IED, which ended up making me lose my arms and legs. You wake up in that hospital bed, and the thought in your mind is, do you give up or do you keep going? So I kept going. In 2012, I believe it was, this man walks in and he says, "I'm Frank Stiller." He goes, "I'm gonna build you a home." I didn't know who was gonna take care of me and my family. I didn't know people cared like this. To know that there's people out there like Tunnel to Towers Foundation that want to do things for veterans is, it's quite emotional. I don't know where I'd be without this smart home. They try to make the home customized to your needs. A smart home for me gives me the independence in life where I can feel and live normally. I look at it as not the worst day of my life, but now I look at it as the best day of my life because I got to live again.
Amen.
Affirmative.
Amen.
Rain and thunderstorms.
All right, that same thing there. Let's go here. Looks like I'm fixing to cut this off.
At work today.
I thought we had
here
court.
At Federal Courthouse in Washington, D.C. downtown. And the reason they're at work today, even if Donald Trump himself does not want to testify to this grand jury, to speak to them and tell his side of the story, there are other witnesses coming in today. So that's the primary thing that we are expecting to see at some point. They're very likely already hearing from at least one witness, a close personal aide to Donald Trump, who also worked in the White House. That witness, a man named Will Russell, is coming back for the third time to testify here. And we do expect at least one other person to testify today. And so the grand jury is working on that, but it does appear, Eleni, that Donald Trump and his legal team is fully aware an indictment could come at any time. When the grand jury is in session, they can be asked by the Justice Department to vote on and to approve charges, federal criminal charges against the former president. And at this point in time, with Donald Trump receiving that target letter on Sunday, it appears very likely that the Justice Department is prepared to do that very soon. We don't know exactly when the grand jury would be coming in next after they finish their work today, and we don't know if that indictment would indeed be today, but we are watching, we are waiting, and there is a lot of other unknowns too about exactly what would be in this case, exactly how many charges, what the charges would be. What we do know is that it has been an expansive investigation around what happened at the White House after the 2020 election leading up to January 6th, and also what the Trump team was trying to do across the United States.
Okay, Polans, thank you so much for that update. Well, Cuba is seeing a new wave of small business owners. Just ahead, we'll take a look at the business.
Is going to investigate this. The thing is, Jose, they lost all credibility after Uvalde. They said they were going to investigate what happened, and we've already seen that they gave themselves a clean bill of health. And it was journalists who had to go and find all of the ways that DPS had failed in the response to Uvalde. So they have no credibility, and I don't expect this investigation to really be legitimate and find much.
Just wondering, Julian, I mean, it's like these things are happening and they're almost happening in a vacuum, you know, like the state of Texas is putting buoys on and razor wire, and then it's almost as if everything is ad hoc. There's no, what is it, Julian, that could be done?
I told them 5 years ago, if not 6, the best plan of action would be like the government done pertaining to the Tennessee River, TVA, in building dams to cause the rivers to swell. But not only would it cause the river to swell down towards Texas, the border, Rio Grande River, but it would also be able to produce electricity of hyper coming off of the water, hyper electricity. They didn't want to do that. They didn't want to do that. I'm going to say by now, 6-7 years later, they could probably almost already have a dam completed. That way they could govern the water. Sometimes the Rio Grande is only a stream that you can barely get over in places basically knee high. But then there's other times whenever the river's raging, depending upon how much water it gets up towards the northern areas, to the degree that it's uncontrollable. They was having the same problem out of the Tennessee River. That's whenever somebody come up with a formula towards putting in, I think if I'm not mistaken, either 17 or 22 hydro dam locks that now helps to produce electricity, providing, give or take, probably around 30 million people. In other words, they've made money off of their investment. The investment that they put in, TVA, is now making enough money that they can reach out and they can substitute old stuff for new stuff, and they can maintenance and turn it into basically a full-fledged corporation. The way that they're doing it down on the Rio Grande, pertaining to Texas right now, they're spending money after money after money after money after money, and first of all, they're not accomplishing what they should or what they thought that they was going to accomplish, and number two, they're not getting no repay on it. The walls that Donald Trump put up, I don't forgot now how much it cost to put the wall up, but then I heard a report where it was costing money to take the wall down. The buoys that they're putting up right now in the middle of the Rio Grande, what are they going to do whenever weather don't cooperate to the point that the Rio Grande basically turns into nothing but dust? There is no water in the Rio Grande because they didn't control the Rio Grande. Why somebody hadn't already done that is beyond me, especially with so many people down there in Texas and so many people over in Mexico, because it could actually be profitable for both sides. Plus, you could widen the river to the degree that it would basically be a suicide mission right off the top if you pursued any type of avenue towards trying to get across the river, either by a small boat or swimming. It would basically be like trying to go from here to Argentina swimming in the ocean. And if you're that naive and that whatever to the degree that you're going to attempt that, odds are you're going to fail again and again and again, and a trillion, billion, zillion times more times again, because it's basically impossible. Like I said, whenever I first proposed this, whenever Donald Trump was president, of building a dam, controlling the Rio Grande, just like they control the TVA over here on the Tennessee Riverside, the Ohio the same way. There's other major water corridors that other companies are in charge of towards controlling, that basically turn it into a profitable business. The Tennessee River was the same way, depending upon what kind of water flow was happening. There was times that the Tennessee River was so narrow that you could basically walk across it. But then there was other times, depending upon if there was flooding going on, massive amounts of water, that the TVA would be a raging river that would cause so much flooding and so much damage that it'd be taking people's lives, because they wasn't familiar in the floodplain and just exactly how high that the water could actually get on the Tennessee River. So to me, by them spending hundreds of millions, if not probably by now billions of dollars, is absolutely asinizing, because they could have done already built a hydro dam on the Rio Grande in controlling the water level and in also making money on their investment. They chose not to do this. They chose to go with a wall. Then they chose to go with serpentine wire, barbed wire. Then now they're choosing towards going with buoys. And all the manpower. God only knows what the final bill is going to be pertaining to this incredible challenge that our politicians is attacking this in the wrong way. It's sad. In addition to all the unnecessary lives that is going to be destroyed and all the unnecessary money that's going to be spent. Futile. Absolutely futile.
Could be done.
Well, what needs to happen is the federal government needs to step in more forcefully here, Jose, and file a lawsuit. Now, the DOJ is moving forward. It also needs to be denounced directly by President Biden. Here's the thing. He has the moral high ground on this. When I read about this, it reminded me of the days of family separation, where even people who might agree with a border wall or some more stringent ways to keep people out of the country, they read about this and they say, what in the world is this? This is not what I stand for. I can't agree with this. Biden needs to seize that in this moment. But unfortunately, so far, I think the administration has been sitting back and being too passive about this. He has a moment here where he can be forceful, take the moral high ground, and also make sure that the DOJ steps in and tries to stop this. Instead of that, what we're getting is a private lawsuit, and Mexico talking about a lawsuit under international law. The DOJ really needs to step in here. And yesterday, Beto O'Rourke called for that. Members of the Texas congressional delegation have called for that. It's time for them to step up.
And Julian, meanwhile, New York City is set to distribute flyers at the U.S.-Mexico border telling folks to consider another city when deciding where to settle in the U.S. It reads there, in quote, no guarantees the city will be able to provide shelter and resources. Cities across the country are grappling with this crisis. What's the long-term solution here, Julian?
Well, the long-term solution here is put a stop to this busing of migrants ad hoc, as you mentioned, by states like Texas and Florida, also to be able to deliver more FEMA money to cities like New York City, Los Angeles, and others that have taken the lion's share of these migrants. For New York City, that's more than 80,000 or so migrants. It's not only the ones who have been bused by Florida and by Texas, but also migrants who go and just travel to New York and find a way to get there. So there needs to be more resources dedicated to these communities, just like there needs to be more resources dedicated to border communities who also shoulder a lot of these responsibilities.
Julian Castro, it's always a pleasure to see you. I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Up next, it's opening day of the Women's World Cup in New Zealand, and it all began with a stunning upset. Plus, there is a lone winner of the $1 billion Powerball prize. What we know? Next, you're watching Jose Diaz-Balart Reports on MSNBC.
This is American infrastructure, a prime target for cyber attacks.
Is that the Ukraine just crouching down right by a grenade there? Look, I didn't see that, so let's move away from that. Look, I mean, you've got the Ukrainian military.
I'm Jim Bitterman in Paris, and this is CNN.
You know, the puzzling thing to me, how can a world, a planet, whenever COVID first broke out and the United States was scrambling towards creating this vaccine, and then other nations jumped on board towards the same thing. Of course, your poor nations was basically the last ones, and they suffered the most whenever it comes to loss of life. How can a planet go from one extreme to another to the degree of wanting to save life, now taking life, or not caring about life, pertaining to wars, endless wars, and commotions going on all over the world? How could this have happened? One must ask. How could this have occurred? There is no other explanation for it other than it being a supernatural phenomenon that is taking place, that has taken place, that is taking place, of causing humanity to be swayed just as easily to one side as it does the other side. And it talks about this in Daniel, the last chapter of Daniel, how that knowledge will be increased, but how that they'll be as a drunkard going from one side to the other. We are absolutely living in that era right now, to where it is so contradictory from one group of people versus one state versus one nation versus another nation. It is so contradictory right now. It is absolutely unbelievable in what I'm witnessing, in watching how things is unfolding, no longer on a decade by decade or a generation by generation, but now it's unfolding not just by the year, but almost by the day. By the day. And I guess maybe the reason for that is because of all the mainstream media and the satellites and internet and artificial intelligence pertaining to the social media, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But my goodness, have you ever seen such drastic extremes? Going from one side to the other in almost a hiccup between the two. It's really, really tragic for the Homo sapiens and what's happening right now to the planet. And that's just the Homo sapiens. So can you only imagine how harmful that it is to the rest of the ecosystem pertaining to the animal life, the plant life, the fowl life, the marine life. I mean, it's just absolutely chaotic. And whenever the Bible talks about in the first chapter of Revelation, chapter 6, verses 1 and 2, that it was as the noise of thunder, one of the beasts up in heaven said, "Come and see." If that prophecy is not being fulfilled today in regards towards the world becoming chaotic, it will never be fulfilled. Because I guarantee you, with all the radio stations, TV stations, social media platform, internet, etc. I mean, I was in Murray, Kentucky last night. I stopped at Walmart. I purchased a rug. And then I come on around through Mayfield, Kentucky, looking at some of the flood damage and stuff over in that area. But I thought to myself, you take a group of people 2 years ago that got bombarded by F3, and I think it was more like an F4 tornado that ripped through their town, that ripped through their city, that is still evident, driving around and seeing the damaged buildings and the collapse of all the structures and the whole visualness of what you're going to tangibly see whenever you drive through the town. And then to think that same town got hit again with over, I think it said almost 11 inches of rain in less than a 24-hour period, and it broke all-time records. The only difference is that I could visually see that occurred of the Mayfield flooding versus the Waverly, Tennessee, Humphrey County flooding, is that the Humphrey County flooding collected off of the railroad, basically a lake that it was holding back until the railroad levee gave way. When the railroad levee gave way, on top of the 8+ inches or however much rain that they got, it was a whole it was just like blowing up a dam, destroying a dam, like what went on over in Ukraine area, over in that area, with that Russia was behind. The Russian government was behind. That much force actually was moving houses off the foundations and cars, flipping them upside down, and killed over 20 some odd people in Waverly, Tennessee. It wasn't quite that bad in Hickman, Kentucky, whenever I drove through there last night and kind of viewed the situation over. But still, again, you're going to have a lot of people that's going to have to rip up rugs, rip up paneling, basically restore the bottom parts of their houses. I seen a lot of people last night that was working on their automobiles with fans and drying them out and taking their seats out and trying to dry their vehicles out that was submerged underwater. In addition to the long-term effect, because whenever that water gets over the sewer system, that sewer now gets distributed all throughout your yard, all throughout basically the whole area, and the mold, between the mold and the sewer and all the other contaminants that a flood causes, it literally will bring people to a sudden sickness. Just like they was talking about earlier, that you don't need to go in the oceans right now with any lacerations on your body. If you got any type of cuts or lacerations, you need to stay away from those areas, because those are the areas that can be infected the quickest. And it's just unbelievable in how much we are witnessing on a level that I could not even begin to fathom that was going to occur before COVID, that now is occurring after COVID. And the reason why I think that this is going on is because prior to COVID, pre-COVID, the world had become asphyxiated by getting faster and faster and quicker and rolling more and more and more and more. And nobody was really paying attention towards what was actually occurring. Nobody was paying attention towards the damages that was actually occurring with us avoiding these subjects. You know, kind of like out of sight, out of mind. Well, now, since COVID's hit, people's had time to back up, think, revent, look at things, itemize things, and all of this has now suddenly come up to the surface. From the pollutants to the weather going crazy to global warming to contaminations in the oceans and our water supply. It's just unbelievable how that we have done a 180-degree turn from a planet that was, or at least acting like that they was concerned about everybody's life and giving out masks and giving out vaccination shots, to the point that now it's gone the other direction. If that isn't being done on a supernatural phenomenon level, I will kiss your tail and give you 30 minutes to draw up a crowd before I do it. I'm sure the media, satellites, internet, social media platform, artificial intelligence, it's all had a big effect in allowing for it to surface. But the rumble that's going on right now is absolutely a phenomenon in and of itself towards how many people have stepped up to the plate, because before COVID they thought everything was hunky-dory and it was basically on autopilot, or people basically thinking that our officials was taking care of everything. And now, since COVID has hit, now we're realizing just exactly how much of not a job that they was doing in protecting us and taking care of us as what we're seeing today. You know, you can only put something on cruise control for a certain amount of time. Autopilot and cruise control is a good thing. Those are good inventions that humanity has created in stable conditions. But whenever you're not dealing with stable conditions, whenever you're not dealing with stable repercussions, normal repercussions, that's the time that somebody needs to grab a hold of the wheel and really stay in tune towards where they're going, how they're getting there, how fast they're going, how safe it is, etc., etc.
This is CNN.
A vote to expunge his impeachments before August.
There's no deal, but I've been very clear from long before when I voted against impeachments that they put in for purely political purposes. I support expungement, but there's no deal out there.
Speaker McCarthy there with our colleague, Ryan Nobles on the Hill. Joining me now is NBC News senior Capitol Hill correspondent Garrett Haake. Jim Messina, the former Deputy Chief of Staff and Campaign Manager.
Whoa.
.43% of Americans are open to a third-party candidate or an alternative candidate. That's not just a margin for that's a winnable percentage right there. But it never materializes to that degree. Why not?
It doesn't, because when push comes to shove, as those voters who indicate early on in an election year or the previous year that they are open to a third party or an independent candidate, as things get closer, they rethink that and they come to that conclusion. Well, my vote's going to be wasted. The only third-party candidate in recent years who had an impact was Ross Perot, because he had the three ingredients for a third-party candidacy: money, opportunity, and perseverance. Not opportunity, but organization. Right now, there is no third party out there that has money, organization, and a long, persevering view. If, in fact, either RFK Jr. or Joe Manchin were to move in that direction and gain some traction, with money, organization, and perseverance that is looking beyond simply this upcoming election, it may have a positive impact to open up our closed political system.
Yeah. They need Elon Musk, the president, the CEO of Facebook, or somebody like that to step up to the plate and say, you know what? Things is going in the wrong direction, and this is what we're going to do to change them. We're going to do this on a diplomatic, Republican way, and we're going to basically go in and bust up these two parties that have made such of a mess, especially the Republican Party, that has made such of a mess in the past 30 plus years that obviously people are seeing today more so than ever before. It is going to take somebody like Ross Perot to do that, and this is the thing that I've made mention of again and again and again, that if there's ever been a time for a Ross Perot, somebody to come in and bust these parties up, today's that time. But whoever it is going to have to be empathetic. They're going to have to make sense in their ideologies. They're going to have solutions to the problems, and they're going to have to be forthright in how that they message their messages out to the people. If not, it'll just be throwing good money to bad, and ultimately, whenever it's all said and done with, they're not really going to gain. You take somebody like Elon Musk and some of these other people, they're really not going to gain no more popularity than what they've already gained. I mean, just about everybody and their brother knows who they are. So, for them to gain popularity purposes, is it no benefit to them? Donald Trump, on the other hand, he thinks that no matter how people are talking about him, regardless whether they're talking about him good or talking about him bad, that somehow or another he's going to come out on top with popularity purposes in being able to stay that much more powerful and that much more richer. Until the people are willing to wake up and boycott people like that and put an end to that type of idiocy, odds are Donald Trump's liable to wind up being more powerful and being more rich at the end of his life than what he could ever desire, because he did step out there. He was courageous in putting his name out there, regardless whether it was good or bad. I just can't see that benefiting nobody like Elon Musk or I forgot the guy, the Facebook guy's name. I should know his name. I just can't see where that's going to benefit anybody in that category unless they are very, very persuasive with the American people pertaining to the direction that we need to go in.
This political system.
Yeah, because the difference would be this time, let's say it's a no labels candidate, and they've already secured a presence, they're told, on all 50 state ballots. An attractive enough candidate, not everybody would do it. And you mentioned Ross Perot. Had he not quit the race very early on in the race, before he did so, he was leading President Bush Sr. and Bill Clinton, and even after that, every entering looked, kind of crazy.
Somebody got to him. Somebody, I'm just thinking this now, that I can't prove this, but somebody very, very powerful basically went in and blackmailed him and caused fear to come into his heart that caused him to retreat. That would be the only reason why that a man had done already stuck his neck out that way and had some brilliant, brilliant ideals would retreat from the position that he was in at the time. In other words, he was either blackballed or he was being threatened to be blackballed. That's the primary reason why Nixon went ahead and took the impeachment, is because if he didn't take the impeachment, he had already been told by enough powerful people that you either take the plea deal in walking away with a little bit of dignity, or we're fixing to take you down a path like you could never ever begin to believe. And basically that's what frightened Nixon into going ahead and throwing a towel in and saying, you know what, it's no longer worth it. And he walked away elegantly from that position that he was in, that situation that he was in. And I personally believe that basically the same thing happened with Ross Perot. And they do the same thing to high advanced ministers, regardless whether it's Oral Roberts, regardless whether it's Jimmy Swaggart, regardless whether it's somebody like Billy Graham or whatever. Once they find any dirt on that person, they basically use that dirt against that person in weaponizing that leverage to the degree of saying, okay, if you do not back down, if you don't do what we want you to do, we're going to hurt you this way. And the last time I looked, blackmail was against the law. But it goes on routinely in America all the time. All the time. But yet now, our politicians will throw stones at how they operate their businesses over in Russia and how they operate their business over in China, in which rightfully so they should. But still, again, there's so many areas that we're just as guilty in ways that some of these communist control countries are towards basically wanting to dominate the public. Or take people with prominent positions and corner them by saying, all right, if you continue on the path that you're on, this is what we're going to do to you, and this is what we're going to do to your family. And that is nothing more than holding an individual hostage in blackmail. And that is supposed to be against the law in America.
He got 19% of the vote. Didn't get any electoral votes, but he did get 19% of the vote. So they can disrupt the system, can't they?
Well, they can do that, but had the Reform Party, which Ross Perot started when he first ran, had they persevered beyond the next election cycle, he sort of lost interest then and pulled his money. They could have had a real impact moving forward, the Reform Party, but they just gave up too soon.
That's well said. That's well said and right. And Bob, you're making me feel...
So why did they give up? What forced that decision after applying that kind of time and money and effort and energy? Why did he give up? What was the real reasons in behind him giving up?
Only you and I can remember Bobby Kennedy Sr. It's a sad commentary on our times, right? Well, good seeing you, my friend. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil.
Babar on all of that. In the meantime, he's been watching Tesla. Some Buffalo numbers, but again, the profit line getting squeezed with all those price cuts. So there's no problem with the number of cars Elon Musk is selling. It's just the money he makes off them. After this.
Wishing I was deep in the water somewhere, got the blue sky breeze and it don't.
Contaminated beaches, contaminated water. Boy,
Some
they
history.
once more it goes from one extreme to another towards making it look bad and telling us the truth, and then all of a sudden they'll pop on a song like that and make look everybody on their beach having a really, really good time. So many contradictory imageries that's going on right now, almost on every level.
And it pretty much shut the conversation.
Yeah, and it's telling that Democrats would rather attack him personally than actually deal with the substance of the hearing, which was the weaponization of the government against free speech. And it used to be, we don't have to agree with everything that RFK says. We don't have to think that all of his ideas are good. But it used to be that the way that you flesh out the bad ideas is by publicly debunking and debating them. Now, all the Democrats want to do is shut down speech entirely. They don't want to give him a platform, and perhaps it is because they're worried that he poses a significant threat to President Joe Biden.
The collusion.
Kind of like what they've done to Dennis Jackson. Dennis Shane Jackson. They didn't want to give him a platform. The church communities didn't want to give Dennis Jackson a platform around here. They wanted to deny him. They wanted to ridicule him. They wanted to put him in a category of being either an idiot, a goofball, a lunatic, and then there towards the last put him in a category of being a homegrown terrorist. They did not want Dennis Jackson to have that platform pertaining to that freedom of speech. And because of it, look at where that they have gone now in the past 30 plus years. They have went in the opposite direction towards peace and utopia, and that was the very thing that initiated the ministry of the Windmill Ministries missions, other than John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, pertaining to the Lord Jesus Christ. But now it has backfired on them. But the bad thing about it backfiring on them, even to this day, they're still so two-faced and they're still so lame that they refuse to acknowledge that they was wrong and that they messed up. They messed up in going up against the message coming from the messenger because they didn't like the message. The message was too steep and too abrupt, pertaining to the opening of the seals and the things that was going to be going on with the apocalypse model coming out of the Bible as far as Armageddon. Well, you know what? I can't help it. And the bottom line is, not only did they not want to support me, but they actually wanted to attack me and destroy me by destroying my credibility in the eyes of the public. And if you don't believe that, all you got to do is sift through my literature, and I can prove to you attack after attack after attack after attack of how that they was trying to diminish or how that they was trying to provoke. In lots of cases, they was trying to provoke me into doing something, including my brother, as far as us crossing over the line, and then they would be able to stand back in the corner and say, 90-90 boo-boo. See there, we told you that the guy was vicious. We told you that he wasn't a friend to the American people. We told you this, we told you that. In provoking. They tried to do the very exact same thing to other prophets, especially the Lord Jesus Christ. They was trying to take his dignity from him. They was trying to steal his integrity from him. But Jesus held on. Just like other prophets of God has held on. Moses held on to what the Pharaohs, the Egyptians, was trying to do to him. And there towards the last, after going through sequence after sequence after sequence, I believe it was something like 10 different sequences that went on before it finally got so bad that the Egyptian pharaohs had to acknowledge that they had lost and Moses' God had won. And if that's what it takes again, pertaining to all this hullabaloo that has went on with the founder of the Windmill Ministries missions, well then I'll sit back, I'll wait, I'll delay, I'll dig in, I'll make my videos like I'm doing right now. I'll discuss to people in what has occurred. I'll discuss to people in what shouldn't be occurring. I'll discuss to people what we do need to do to turn it around. And those that listen to me can either support me or they can do like the bunch before pertaining to the baby boomers and the Woodstock era and the Beatles era. They can continue to snarl up their nose and basically make their own beds hard. But while they're making their own beds hard, keep in mind, they're not just making their beds hard, they're making their children's beds hard, their children's beds hard, and all the above. You know why? Because at the time, they was only concerned about themselves. And actually, they was using the imagery of my message pertaining, and it's not my message, it's God's message, but they was using that message and putting it out there pertaining to peace, peace. No, we want peace, peace. And they never did truly want peace. Not a true, godly, unique, authentic peace. They wanted a generic or aftermarket peace. They wanted their own development of their own peace. In the meantime, while they was cherry picking towards the things that they was going to be supporting in the Bible or being conviction of in their own personal lives, everything was being basically twirled out the window. And in reality, and I just told an individual this the other day over in Kenton, Tennessee, that is a prominent figure over in Kenton, Tennessee, I said, in reality, instead of you being ashamed of me, it should be the other way around. It should be me ashamed of you, and it should be you that's ashamed of you because it was you and your group of people that allowed for this thing to get in the shape that it's in. So don't try to use manipulation, psychological warfare on me, because we know what's went on. We know what shouldn't have happened that did happen, and we know the people that either attacked the founder of the Windmill Ministries or sat idly by and allowed for the founder to basically take on lick after lick after lick in trying to provoke him or bring him down. They did bring my brother down because my brother could not take on the licks, psychologically speaking. And, you know, I bring it up a lot of times that initially it was the courts up here in Weakley County that let my brother down pertaining to dereliction of duty. But it goes beyond just dereliction of duty. I'm telling you, it goes beyond just dereliction of duty towards a group of people that wasn't willing to participate in their authorities, in their authority that was given to them by humanity. It wasn't just that they didn't do their jobs, but it was psychologically speaking, they was actually wishing that blood got on the floor, and it didn't matter if it was my blood on the floor, or it wouldn't have mattered if they would have provoked me to the level that I'd done something in bringing somebody else's blood to the floor. They know that that was going to be an entrapment technique, that if either one of them took place, I was doomed. And if you go back and look at what has occurred in my life for the past 40 plus years, that's exactly the pattern that they was pursuing in my life again and again and again, that they wanted my calling to be doomed, even at the expense of dooming the messenger that had the message. Which it all goes back, okay? It all goes back to the fact that they didn't like the message. I didn't create the message. I'm not the author of the message. All I am is the delivery boy. I'm just delivering the message. And obviously, something has went wrong in the past 30 plus years. Whenever you got a nation as strong as the United States is supposed to be, towards us being $32 trillion in debt. All this gun violence, all this opioid and fentanyl drug problems, all the gun violence, all the other problems pertaining to the women standing up for their rights, all the other problems pertaining to the illegal immigrants coming over here, being flooded. Obviously, something has happened, but now the ones that are guilty of that aren't going to come forth and come clean. They're willing to actually take down everything and everybody else. That way they won't have to be honest with their testimony towards telling the world in what type of failures that they've been. And if the young parties, if the innocent parties, if they sit idly by and they let this occur, then in actuality they have no one to blame but themselves, because they could have stood up, they could have made themselves noticed, they could have been like me and make videos and voice their opinions about various subject matters. But if they're so frightened, or if they're so whatever, maybe they're shy or whatever word you want to use, then basically they deserve whatever calamity is going to fall into their lives, because they didn't stand up the same way as the people over in Afghanistan. They didn't stand up for their dignified rights, and because of it, 11 days later, the Taliban takes back over the country, and now they're under Taliban regime rule. The women are being treated unfairly. The women are being raped. The children ain't being taught right. The women don't have privileges of being able to work in government procedures pertaining to how that they organize things. I could go on and on and on about the failures that they have brought up into their own lives. Now, the Ukrainian people, let's look at them real quick. On the other hand, they've been just the opposite. They have proven to society as well as to the Russian government that we're not going to stand by this. We're going to fight, and we're going to fight, and we're going to continue to fight, just like Ronald Reagan said that it would be better to die on our feet than to be wimped down on our knees. And the people in Ukraine deserves all the praise in the free world of capitalizing on their own decisions, of their own freedoms, to be able to make their own decisions in a Republican, Democratic state that they're trying to pursue. I've never seen democracy being attacked right now with autocracy the way that it's being attacked. And until we the people are willing to stand up, just like the Ukrainians, we're going to see the depletion of democracy being gnawed on, being mauled, being deranged, being hurt, being demented. And this is all part of the game plan pertaining to the Luciferian Lucifer that is out to kill, steal, and destroy and take over the world. This is all part of the game plan that he's involved in. And unless we're willing to stand up and realize this and say, you know what? This contamination has went far enough. This hardship has went far enough. It's time for we the people to stand up and take back over our government and take back over our Christian positions, and not allow for this to continue to get worse and worse and worse. And if we don't do that, then God forbid, we're going to be right back in the category as the Afghanistan women and children and people over there that wasn't willing to stand up for what they should have stood up for. Good luck to all of us as we go through this message again in so many different so many different subject matters, so many different levels of subject matters, that unless you're really, really concerned about more than just your personal life, but about generations below us and generations below us, then odds are you probably ain't going to think that the fight's worth it. The fight's worth it. The fight is worth it. Even if you have to sacrifice your flesh, even if you have to sacrifice your own life, the fight ultimately is going to be worth it, because the Bible is very clear in saying that the meek shall inherit the earth. Who are the meek? Those who are standing up for true righteousness and justice towards the glory of God. Not for the glory of ourselves, but for the glory of God. Thank you. God bless you. And good luck to all of us. Shalom.